just bestowed upon me. So I haven't been able to get myself to click the fundraiser link. I'm not sure if you all saw, it was the first comment that I listed in the broadcast, but allow me to just throw it up again. But Bo Adams, you guys, said, "Do you want the good news?" When I signed on. Hi, Pablo. Well, speaking of Bo Adams, why don't I just bring up my co-host? Looking sharp, Bo.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. In fact, it's usually my morning time, but I was just going to throw up the link, even though Ian's already on it. I'm sure other people might have the link too. Feel free to just throw it into the comments sporadically throughout just spam it. It's great. So we've already had some donations to the fundraiser. Bo, would you like to say who has given a helping
We were at
hand?
a total of 210. We had Tim Conrad give 100, Ella, my buddy Valentine, give 100, and Mark Gage gave about 10. We're at 210, and we haven't even started. We're on a good roll already.
That's absolutely awesome.
Raise the roof.
Yes, raising the roof at noon. Guys, I'm usually still asleep by noon. Let's not even tell a lie. So,
Hi, Asha.
you guys, this fundraiser, obviously the title is kind of self-explanatory, is for Hurricane Ida. We're raising money. All proceeds are going to the Second Harvest Food Bank. The link is going to be in the chat throughout the broadcast. Of course, awards are also going to be donated. And you take your pick, whatever you want to do. So, Hurricane Ida, guys. Do you know that it touched down on August 29th? That was pretty recently. The devastation, it spanned 8 states, all right? So there's still a bunch of ish going on. We chose a food bank because we wanted to see a way that everybody's money could go as further as possible, and food seemed to be what everyone was pulled to.
Farther. So, they understand.
Yeah, they get it. All right, so we have our first guest in the broadcast studio, and I kind of think that we might as well just kick right into it. Do you guys know Ian? You know Ian. Well, before I bring Ian up really quickly, let me just throw up. Well, I guess I don't have my intro in here anymore. There it is. Great. Thanks to Lucia for throwing that one together. So I'm going to click on Ian and bring Ian up here.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, how are you? So I'm going to actually take Bo and I off the screen and just let you launch into your presentation if you don't mind. Is that chill?
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Here's Ian, everybody.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Ian McLaughlin, and I have a PhD in neuroscience. I'm a scientist, and right now I live in Philadelphia, but I grew up in Puerto Rico and in Miami, and so hurricanes were like a yearly thing, and I was sort of used to these storms, having several days with no electricity or water, and using candles and no air conditioning, right? But we never experienced something like the devastation we've all seen, from the more recent storms down in Louisiana. And so now that I live in Philly, I sort of became accustomed to never having to deal with very serious flooding. But this storm, Ida, was so significant that it carried all that water all the way up here and pretty much turned my apartment building into like an island. And so, hey, Mark, hey, Marcia, or Marcia, thanks for being here. Hey, Jess. So our experience wasn't not remotely as devastating as what happened in Louisiana, but just to set the stage for the main thing that I wanted to bring to this discussion, just really briefly, it's one of the things that I think a lot of folks don't intuitively consider when a big storm like this hits, the dangers of the aftermath of the storm. And so I'm just going to share just a couple pictures of what it was like the day after the storm reached Philly. So here's one. Okay, so I know it's kind of hard to understand what's going on here, but at the end, this is a downward sloping street. This is like you drive up a hill to get to my apartment building. And at the end there's a stop sign that you can usually see, and it's completely underwater. And then you can sort of see the trees at the end there. I mean, these are all large maple trees, and you can see the water is basically right, it's covering the bottom parts of the trees, right, or of the leaves. And so that was a lot of water, right? Here, and I'll get rid of that. Okay, and then, but probably some of the crazier pictures were what happened in our garage. And so, you can sort of see some cars that are basically the water's at the top, but at the bottom of the garage, what you're seeing sort of peeking out from the top there, that's an SUV that's completely underwater. And you can see the color of the water, right? Not exactly appetizing. But something that we saw that was just bananas was this picture here, and then this other picture here. Okay, so this is a highway called 676. Right. And as someone who's done biological research that depended on the use of viruses that we literally made, working with bacteria to manufacture them and taking a bunch of immunology and pathology classes, all that kind of stuff, people with those experiences tend to go in one of two directions, right? Either we become germaphobes and avoid touching surfaces, or we go in the opposite direction and just sort of accept the filthiness and rely on, hand washing and stuff like that. And obviously the pandemic has changed some things. But, apart from the whole, pandemic, I went in the direction of just accepting that bacteria is around us, and the bacteria are legion, right? Every surface with which we interact is, coated in tons of bacteria, right? But anyways, the only reason that I thought, I might be able to contribute to this, wonderful idea. If you are just seeing this now, Veda just posted a link to where you can donate some aid to the folks who are suffering the most from the aftermath of the storm. But so anyways, what I thought I might be able to bring to this is that, I used to live in a part of the country where we would get flooding pretty regularly from hurricanes, right? And so people in those areas can tend to be aware of the dangers of the water that tends to linger, but not necessarily everybody, and clearly not the folks in Philly. And so, these are the two pictures that I think are worth highlighting, right? One picture, here, let me show you also this one, which is it's not like the worst thing that I saw, but you can sort of see, right, that this is the new picture that I just put up. This is a down ramp to the basement, basically the basement of my building. And you can see sort of that there's a dumpster that's basically completely underwater. That dumpster wasn't empty, right? And then behind those dumpsters are just like dozens of trash cans. Yeah, this is Philly. There's like dozens of trash cans. All of the trash from the entire building are, sit there to be collected, right? And I happen to know personally that there were some used diapers in those trash cans, some discarded food, some horrible stuff that you would never want to touch, but you can't see it. And since it's water, right? Water is this wonderful solvent, right? It can dissolve so many things, right? And, if you can imagine what happens when you put a drop of food coloring, right, into a cup of water, at the beginning, it's sort of, you can see where the food coloring is, but after a few minutes, it just disperses throughout all of the water. That's what happens with all of those molecules from all of that garbage, right? And then what happens very, very quickly is that a bunch of microbes that normally would never be able to, live, you would never come into contact with them, right? Because of you don't touch those things. They just explode, they proliferate a ton. And so as a result, because it's water, all of those microbes are spread all over the place, right? And so all that water sitting there, all that garbage. It's not like trash bags are particularly watertight, right? They're not even really made to be super watertight. And so, that's basically what happens with all the nastiness when all that water comes. So that is why I wanted to bring up this picture of somebody swimming in the 676. It's a very frustrating highway. It's far too narrow for the amount of traffic that it uses every day. And you can see that there's a bridge passing above it, right? That's those bridges are high enough for semi trucks to pass underneath them, right? So they're pretty high. And so the teenager in me totally understands the draw to dive into a highway, right? But you can see that water is not pristine, right? It's like straight up turbid. It's gross. It's like visibly gross. And the land underneath is a straight up highway. And I can tell you that this highway is essentially never cleaned. And so you not only have whatever's accumulated along the land from my, the dumpsters at my building, but you also have all the byproducts of like thousands and thousands of cars moving and braking and accelerating and, conducting combustion, right? All of those molecules are just accumulating there over the course of years and years and years. And so just think about it. What's that water touching, right? And, cities aren't really designed to handle this kind of water. But more importantly, the way that like garbage, waste, and maybe most importantly, sewage is handled just goes completely haywire, right, with all of that flooding. And so, so Molly says here in Pittsburgh during flash floods, we get the sewers backing up exactly in our basements because the main sewer lines can't handle the water. Exactly. And so flooding can bring things, cause things like sewers and septic systems is another one to overflow, bringing all of that nastiness right to the surface and then just sort of leaving it there, sitting there as the water slowly recedes. And as a result, there's like this massive expansion of truly dangerous bacteria, viruses, and protozoa that feast upon that grossness. And so, they're not all necessarily threatening, but many of them definitely are threatening and can cause a whole variety of maladies if we come into contact with them. And so, like some of those old school conditions that like you might have remembered from, if you're my age, playing the Oregon Trail, dysentery, cholera, things that can cause sepsis, septicemia, leptospirosis, all kinds of like GI horribleness that can be potentially fatal, particularly when, you don't have easy access to like medicine, right? Because you have no transportation because of all the flooding. And so, okay, so all of that grossness is just accumulating there, and it can take months and months, even after the water's gone. It can take months for those various microbes to eventually die out after having proliferated, right? And so all this to say that in the aftermath of a hurricane, as dangerous as the hurricane itself is, right? Super dangerous. But as dangerous as the hurricane itself is, and the tornadoes and all that kind of stuff that devastated parts of New Jersey, close to where I live, where I work, parts of Pennsylvania, people being caught in basement apartments that flooded and they were lost, people who were caught in cars that were flooded, and just tragedies, right? All this to say that as dangerous as all that is, the aftermath of all that water just sitting there is a kind of a sneaky source of suffering, and mosquitoes also, by the way, depending upon where you live. So all this to say, this long-winded way to say, don't do what this person did and dive into water that is filled a highway up to the bridge above it. If you have any cuts, if all of those microbes can infect mucosal membranes, your mouth, your eyes, your nose, other parts of the body that are similar, and any kind of wounds. And so, you don't want to add literal insult to injury by picking up a bug, by, messing around in water that's just been sitting there. And then you also have to be careful after the water's cleared out. So that's my sort of PSA as a scientist going, who's lived in hurricane-strewn areas, but then also had the pleasure of dealing with this kind of flooding. And so, yeah, avoidable sickness becomes super prolific. Exactly. And Mark says, and then Scott says, maybe the dysentery will kill all the COVID. Well, I don't know about all that, but yeah, I mean, and then we know that in certain parts of the country, right, hospitals are pretty full, right, dealing with the pandemic. And so what you don't want to do is, need medical care. Even if you've survived the hurricane, if the flooding is gone, you don't want to have to end up in a hospital, and potentially in a situation where the ICU can't even take you in. And so Veda says, dysentery sucked after fording the river with my oxen. So Veda, did you play the Oregon Trail? That's awesome. Yeah, so that's what I have for you. So once again, Veda has a link to an organization to which you can contribute. That is a food bank, to help people who don't have access to resources and are struggling with the aftermath of the storm. And so if you have the ability, we would all deeply appreciate it. So that's what I got for you. Is the water acidic? I would have to think about that a little bit. I could sort of see it going both ways. I would imagine that, like, on balance, it would be acidic. But it probably wouldn't be one uniform. It certainly wouldn't be one uniform pH, right? It would depend on, what sort of, compartments the water is in or is sitting, right? I would imagine that, yeah, overall it would be acidic in most cases, but I'm not sure. It wouldn't be like touching acid though. So Veda says that's a yes. I'd love that game. Yeah, I played that in my computer class, Oregon Trail. So welcome back, everybody.
Welcome
Thanks for having
back.
me, by the way. Also,
I was trying to respond and say, yeah, I played Oregon Trail, but instead of typing yes, I clicked on my picture. I don't know how the dyslexia is already kicking in after only 15 minutes. Yikes. Wow, Ian, thank you for all that information. That was an awesome, awesome presentation. Is there more?
So, real quick, is there what's the process? Not process, but where are you guys at now? Is everything starting to clean up, or
in Philly, yeah.
Yeah.
So for us, parts of Philly, it was kind of surreal because, I've never seen a city like this flooded. But like parts of the city were like totally underwater, businesses totally destroyed. And I know in my neighborhood, there were, there are some townhouses, I guess is what you call their walk-ups, that have, basements that were completely flooded. And I happen to know that, several, older residents lived there alone. And, they needed help, that extra help, right? And I live close also to a long-term care facility, and that place got totally evacuated by the National Guard. But yeah, for us, it was a couple days of just like crazy water. We also live really close to like one of the main rivers in Philly called the Schuylkill, and it completely overflowed. And so it was a couple days, basically for a day we didn't have power or water, which becomes kind of tricky with a 2.5-year-old if you don't have water. That's like the rough thing. But because I grew up in Miami and in Puerto Rico, like I have a little bit of a prepper streak in me. So I always have like extra water, even though we never use it. I always have my spare batteries charged for just such an occasion. And so we made it out kind of okay.
That's not really a prepper. That's what everybody should have, honestly.
Hey, I agree. But I'm sure it comes across as a little neurotic to folks who,
The neuroscientist is neurotic?
That's right. True to form. That's exactly right. But yeah, now, so it was a couple days. And then, we were really lucky that the building's electricity came on while there was still some water around. We were sort of like getting ready to hunker down. But yeah, now the water's gone, but there's still damage, and like people's, one of the other things is that like if you have a house that's like flooded and it's flooded for a while, the water doesn't go away. You don't have like some business that can come and like pump out the water from your basement, because where's that water going to go?
Yeah, where does the water go?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's tricky. And so when it comes to in a city, basically you have these big tankers, like big, like think an oil tanker essentially, but you just fill it with water and then you dump it in the river. But what happens is that to those houses, they become flooded and all of those microbes grow, and it becomes very apparent that they've grown because it smells terrible. And so imagine, you're in your house every day, all day, every hour of the day, and it just smells terrible. And I know parts of New Jersey were hit by like I think it was I can't remember what the grading scale is, like a level 4 tornado. Crazy, totally demolished certain towns in New Jersey, and they're still recovering. That those houses just aren't there. It's like it's pretty surreal to see that kind of a storm up here. But yeah, we're okay.
Okay.
This was my first time. Sorry to cut you off, Bo. I just on Twitter, honestly, or not Twitter. What is that app where everyone's on? TikTok, freaking TikTok. I don't spend a lot of time on there, but lately I have been, and I was getting to see all these firsthand TikToks of people whose homes have been destroyed, but not just that, all the people who were experiencing like the basement flooding. And then what a few of them were saying was that like people in New York were told, go in your basement to seek refuge. And like these people had like massive like home theaters down there. So everyone's like bunkering down in their theater. And then suddenly it starts filling up with water. And then they're like, nope, just kidding. Floods. So yeah. I was just surprised that they had actually told people to like seek refuge in the basements. And then suddenly like they're covered up with water.
And it's just one of those things like, municipalities, like they regulate how various construction projects are built based on certain levels of resilience, right? So like this building should be resilient to sometimes they'll say like 100-year storm or something like that, right? Because it just never happens. And so you're not going to spend an extra $2 billion of taxpayer money, right, on something that, it's never been a problem. And so like there's just a threshold beyond which even public officials don't really know what to say, and it can be tragic. People got caught in those basement apartments. Like,
it was this dude rating right, like his home theater chairs, or like I'm sure this man had really good like homeowners insurance. He's probably going to be okay. Yeah. Still, like everything's floating around. Like I don't know, it was insane. And he's like, "Well, we have all our supplies down here, but they're now flooded."
Oh yeah, right, yeah, and getting food. Super hard, right? When you can't drive, maybe your car was destroyed. There's still cars in our garage. I guess the people must be out of town or something, where like they like floated. They like moved from their parking spot, and you can see there's just coated in like mud essentially. But it's like a weird colored mud, and like the insides of the cars are all that color. It's just like completely destroyed. And yeah, so imagine you don't have a car, and like not every city is like this where you can just sort of walk to the grocery store. Fortunately, I could do that. But like, if you live in, let's just say Los Angeles, where like you can't really walk anywhere, right? Or Houston, same thing. Nobody really walks in those cities. You're kind of in a pretty tough situation. And so, the kind of aid
like you
that,
said, in some cities like New Orleans, even the grocery store's flooded. What are they going to do?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
luckily, the Second Harvest is built for flooding. So they're up away on a hill. They're good. And that's one of the most important things, drinking water and food. I mean, you could live in a tent and be all right, but you need drinking water and food. And that's what Second Harvest does.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Michael says Florida changed building codes after Hurricane Andrew. Yeah. So I was actually, I think I was in, Hurricane Andrew didn't hit where I lived. That was like one of the big storms before like Katrina, and some of the more recent massive storms seem to be happening with increased frequency, by the way. But but we were hit by Hugo. I can't even remember all the names of the hurricanes that were never as bad as Andrew. Had like Andrew was a Category 5 hurricane. It had like tornadoes in it, and it really damaged a lot of South Florida. But in any case, yeah, exactly. But I guess this is what convinces regulatory bodies that like, yeah, actually maybe we should build a little bit more resilience. And so fortunately, like the levees this time didn't fail in New Orleans. Otherwise,
that was fortunate.
Maybe worse.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Rev is saying that he can't donate. Rev, if you're on your phone and the links won't work, you'll have to use your Safari or whatever browser you have. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, or you can go to, this is a really roundabout way, but you can go to my IG and the link is in the bio from a phone. That should work. Just an idea.
That's a good point. Yes.
So thank you, everybody. Lucia, for the awards, the med, appreciate it. Andrew from Scotland, good to see you. And Mark, again, thanks for all the support, everybody.
Yeah,
thanks for being on, Ian. It was awesome. I mean, well, having you was awesome. The flooding wasn't.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you guys for inviting me to join. And I appreciate it. And I'll hang out in the audience.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here and opening this up with like some information. I think that was perfect placement for you. It's right at the beginning. So
it's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Everybody say bye to Ian, your favorite neuroscientist.
I'm on your shoulder. I'm like
what?
Your guardian angel on your shoulder.
Let me unpip you. There we go. Wow. Well, we have a little bit of a gap before our next guest. So these gaps, guys, are going to kind of be wild card times. Anything goes. We're going to have a little fun during this broadcast, even though it's a bit of a heavy subject matter, because we got to keep people alive for 12 hours. That's right.
So
is that possible?
When Ian was talking, it triggered something in my head when there's like 5 brain cells left that are active. So that takes a lot.
Yeah.
I went through a flood when I was a kid in Virginia, and we had a basement, and the standing water was a huge problem. But the thing I remember most were the frogs,
The
dead
frog.
frogs everywhere.
Oh
The flood had
man.
killed them, and they'd come into the house, and then they were just all over the place. And me being the 5-year-old guy of the family, I had to go